The massive crystalline doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber swung open with a sound like thunder across the stars. Ambassador Marcus Reed stepped through the entrance and felt his breath catch despite years of diplomatic training. Nothing could have prepared him for this moment. The chamber stretched beyond human comprehension, its curved walls disappearing into shadows that seemed to bend light itself. Thousands of seats arranged in perfect spirals rose from floor to ceiling, each one occupied by a representative of a different alien species. Some beings floated in energy fields, others stood on mechanical legs that clicked against metal floors, and a few existed as pure consciousness contained within glowing spheres. Reed walked alone across the polished black floor toward the center platform, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Every alien eye, sensor, and consciousness focused on him as he moved. The weight of their attention felt like gravity itself pressing down on his shoulders. This was the moment that would determine humanity's fate in the galaxy. Above him, holographic displays showed Earth from orbit. Blue oceans, white clouds, and green continents rotated slowly as data streams flowed past in languages Reed couldn't read. The images were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Beautiful because it was home, terrifying because the Council had the power to destroy it with a single vote. The center platform rose from the floor as Reed approached, lifting him 20 meters into the air until he stood eye level with the lowest tier of council seats. The platform stopped with mechanical precision, leaving him suspended in the middle of the chamber like a specimen in a laboratory. Human representative. A voice boomed from everywhere at once. The words came through translation devices that made the alien speech sound cold and formal. You stand before the Galactic Council to answer charges of treaty violation, illegal weapons development, and threats to galactic peace. Reed looked up toward the highest tier of seats where a figure sat in shadows. Even without seeing clearly, he could sense the authority radiating from that position. This was the Supreme Chancellor, the being who spoke for 47 different alien civilizations. Your species has been members of this galactic community for exactly 73 standard years, the voice continued. In that time, you have been granted protected status, trade agreements, and access to technologies beyond your natural development level. Yet our intelligence services report massive military expansion on your world. The holographic displays changed to show satellite images of Earth's military bases. Weapons factories, shipyards, and research facilities appeared one after another. Reed watched alien representatives shifting in their seats as they saw the scope of human military development. Some made sounds that translation devices couldn't convert. Others began glowing brighter or dimmer depending on their species' emotional responses. The Treaty of First Contact clearly states, another voice joined from a different section of the chamber, that new species may not develop weapons of mass destruction during their probationary period. The evidence against humanity is overwhelming. Reed remained silent as more images appeared. Nuclear weapons, antimatter research, and experimental technologies that pushed the boundaries of physics. To the aliens in the chamber, it looked like humanity had spent the last 7 decades preparing for war. A new alien representative stood up from the middle tier. This being looked like a giant insect with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lighting in rainbow patterns. The human military expansion exceeds safe parameters by factors we have never seen. No species in Council history has developed such destructive capability so quickly. Furthermore, added a voice from an energy being that existed as pure light. Their rate of technological advancement suggests they may soon develop weapons that could threaten entire star systems. This cannot be allowed. Reed felt the mood in the chamber growing more hostile. He could sense the fear behind their words. These aliens had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, but humanity's rapid development scared them. They saw humans as unpredictable and dangerous. The Supreme Chancellor's voice cut through the growing noise. Ambassador Reed, the charges against your species are serious. Violation of the First Contact Treaty carries severe penalties. Your world could face immediate quarantine, cutting humanity off from all galactic civilization forever. Alternatively, the voice paused for effect. Your species could face military intervention to ensure compliance with galactic law. The choice is yours. Reed stepped forward on the platform, knowing this was his moment to speak. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to quiet as thousands of alien beings waited for his response. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Reed began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Earth acknowledges the evidence you have presented. We do not deny that humanity has developed significant military capabilities during our probationary period. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Most species spent months or years denying charges and trying to avoid responsibility. Reed's immediate admission caught everyone off guard. However, Reed continued, we believe the Council should understand why humanity made these choices before passing judgment. The Supreme Chancellor leaned forward slightly. You may present your explanation, Ambassador, but know that treaty violations cannot be excused by circumstances. Reed reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data crystal. Several alien guards immediately tensed, their weapon systems activating, but Reed held up his free hand in a peaceful gesture. Honored Chancellor, I request permission to share classified intelligence that explains humanity's actions. This information will change how the Council views our military development. The chamber erupted in voices, clicks, harmonics, and energy pulses as alien representatives demanded to know what the human was talking about. Reed had never seen anything like it. Thousands of different species all trying to communicate at once created a sound that was both beautiful and terrifying. The Supreme Chancellor raised one hand, and the chamber fell silent immediately. The display of authority was impressive and frightening. With a single gesture, this being could control the voices of 47 civilizations. Permission granted, Ambassador, but be warned that any deception will result in immediate judgment against your species. Reed inserted the data crystal into the platform's interface. Instantly, the holographic displays around the chamber changed. Instead of showing Earth's military facilities, they now displayed deep space sensor readings, energy signatures, and tactical analyses. But these images weren't of human activities. They showed massive fleet movements at the very edge of the galaxy, ships of unknown design massing in numbers that made even the Council's combined fleets look small. 3 months ago, Reed announced, his voice now carrying a weight that made every being in the chamber focus completely on his words. Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected these formations. Based on their trajectory and technology signatures, we estimate they will reach the outer colonies in 18 months. The chamber remained silent, but Reed could feel the shift in atmosphere. The alien representatives were no longer looking at him with suspicion and anger. Now they were looking at the displays with something approaching fear. The human military buildup that you see as treaty violations, Reed continued, was never intended as aggression against the Council or any member species. It was preparation for this. He gestured toward the displays showing the approaching fleet. While the Council has been debating our compliance with treaties, humanity has been preparing to defend this galaxy against something far more dangerous than human weapons. The Supreme Chancellor's voice carried a new tone when he spoke again. And what do you propose the Council do with this information, Ambassador? Reed looked up at the shadowed figure, then let his gaze sweep across the thousands of alien representatives surrounding him. When he spoke again, his voice carried the authority of a species that had faced extinction before and refused to surrender. Honored Council, humanity formally requests permission to demonstrate our defensive capabilities. Not against you, but for you. Because when those ships arrive, you're going to need every advantage you can get. The platform began descending slowly back toward the chamber floor, but Reed's voice carried clearly throughout the vast space. And if there's one thing humanity has learned from our history, it's that when someone declares war on you, you don't respond with half measures. The lights in the judgment chamber began flickering as the Council's emergency protocols activated, sealing the chamber and beginning deep space verification of Reed's claims. 2 days after Ambassador Reed's shocking revelation in the judgment chamber, the Galactic Council's most advanced sensor arrays had confirmed the unthinkable. The approaching fleet was real, massive, and moving with clear hostile intent toward inhabited space. The emergency assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species gathered around holographic displays. Gone were the formal ceremonies and traditional protocols. This was a war council, and everyone present knew it. Reed stood at the center of the circular chamber, manipulating three-dimensional star charts with practiced efficiency. The display showed tactical analyses, fleet compositions, and trajectory calculations that painted a terrifying picture of what was approaching their galaxy. Final sensor confirmation puts the hostile fleet at approximately 40,000 vessels, Reed announced to the assembled representatives. Our xenobiology teams have designated them as the Devourers, based on their behavior patterns in previously contacted galaxies. Chancellor Vorth, the crystalline being who led the council, had changed color from his usual bright blue to a deep purple that indicated extreme stress among his species. How long has Earth known about this threat, Ambassador? Reed's response sent a wave of shock through the chamber. Our deep space monitoring program has been tracking extragalactic signals for 24 years. We've known about hostile intent for 8 years, and we've been certain of their arrival timeline for 3 years. General Kex, the insectoid representative of the Nixari military forces, clicked his mandibles in agitation. His compound eyes reflected the holographic displays as he processed the implications. 24 years of knowledge, and you said nothing to the council? General, what would you have done? Reed's question was direct and challenging. 24 years ago, humanity had barely achieved fusion power. Even 5 years ago, our most optimistic projections showed we couldn't mount effective resistance against this scale of invasion. We needed time to prepare. Admiral Torix of the Valdorian Empire leaned forward, his reptilian features showing skepticism. Time you spent building weapons that violate every treaty in galactic civilization. You deliberately broke our laws. Reed nodded without any sign of apology. Exactly. Because our analysis indicated that conventional galactic warfare doctrine would be completely inadequate against this enemy, the holographic display shifted to show comparative data between standard council military technology and the approaching Devourer fleet. The numbers were sobering. A typical council dreadnought massed 50,000 tons and carried energy weapons capable of destroying continents. The Devourer ships appeared to mass between 200,000 and 500,000 tons each. But mass isn't the real problem, Reed continued, manipulating the display to show movement patterns. Watch how they coordinate. The assembled representatives watched in growing horror as the tactical displays showed the Devourer fleet moving like a single organism. Thousands of ships flowed through space with perfect coordination, no visible command structure, and no detectable communication between vessels. They don't communicate through any method our sensors can identify, Reed explained. No radio transmissions, no quantum entanglement networks, no psionic emanations. They move as one entity with thousands of components. Commander Lyrics of the Solari energy beings shimmered with concern. How is such coordination possible without detectable communication? We believe they share a collective consciousness, Reed replied. Individual ships aren't independent units. They're more like cells in a larger organism, and that organism has been perfecting the art of galactic conquest for millions of years. The display changed again to show a star system at the galaxy's edge. Where there should have been planets orbiting a young star, only debris clouds remained. The destruction was complete and systematic. This is the Outer Reach system, Reed announced. Population, 2.3 billion beings across 4 worlds. The Devourer fleet reached this system 6 months ago. Planetary consumption was completed in 18 hours. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of various alien breathing apparatus and energy field generators. The scope of destruction was beyond anything the Council had ever encountered. Reed continued his briefing with grim efficiency. Based on consumption patterns in other galaxies, the Devourer fleet doesn't seek territory or resources in any conventional sense. They consume entire worlds, converting planetary mass into energy that powers their continued expansion. What do they want? Chancellor Vorth asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Everything, Reed replied simply. Complete consumption of all matter in this galaxy, followed by movement to the next galaxy. They're not conquerors or colonizers. They're a force of nature with a single purpose: growth through consumption. Admiral Torix studied the tactical displays with the eye of a military professional. What response does humanity propose? Surely you didn't spend 24 years preparing just to share intelligence? Reed smiled grimly. Admiral, humanity spent 24 years throwing out every rule of warfare we'd ever learned. We studied the Devourer fleet's methods, analyzed their weaknesses, and designed countermeasures that violate every principle of civilized conflict. The holographic display shifted to show schematic diagrams that made several council members recoil in horror. Weapons capable of destabilizing stars, self-replicating mining systems that could strip asteroid belts in weeks, and defensive platforms that existed partially outside normal spacetime. These designs are monstrous, whispered Commander Lyrics, her energy field flickering with distress. They could destroy entire solar systems. That's the point, Reed replied without hesitation. The Devourer fleet has consumed 17 galaxies over the last 10 million years. They've never encountered effective resistance because every civilization they've faced has tried to fight them using conventional military doctrine. He manipulated the display to show historical battle analyses from other galaxies. Civilized warfare assumes your enemy wants something you can negotiate about. Territory, resources, survival, political control. The Devourer fleet wants complete annihilation of everything you are. You can't negotiate with a force that views your existence as food. General Kex's compound eyes focused intently on the weapon schematics. These human designs, they appear to prioritize maximum destruction over precision or tactical flexibility. Because precision and tactics are luxuries you can afford when fighting civilized opponents, Reed explained. Against an enemy that fights as a single organism with perfect coordination, the only effective strategy is overwhelming, unpredictable destruction applied faster than they can adapt. Chancellor Vorth processed this information for several long moments before speaking. Ambassador Reed, are you suggesting that humanity has developed the capability to defeat this Devourer fleet? Reed's expression grew even more serious. Chancellor, I'm suggesting that humanity has developed the capability to ensure that if we can't defeat them, they won't survive the encounter either. Because that's what it's going to take. The implications of his words settled over the chamber like a toxic cloud. Several alien representatives began urgent conversations in their native languages, while others sat in stunned silence. The Devourer fleet will reach our outer colonies in 16 months, Reed continued. They'll analyze our defenses, adapt their tactics, and begin systematic consumption of inhabited worlds. Standard galactic military forces will delay them by perhaps 3 months at most. He paused, studying the faces and energy patterns of the assembled representatives. But they've never encountered a species willing to destroy entire star systems to stop them. They've never faced an enemy that would rather die fighting than live under occupation. Admiral Torix leaned back in his chair, processing the scope of what Reed was proposing. You're suggesting that humanity's response to invasion is mutually assured destruction on a galactic scale. I'm stating it as fact, Reed replied. Because that's who we are. When someone threatens our existence, we don't look for ways to minimize damage or find acceptable losses. We look for ways to make sure they regret ever encountering us. The chamber's emergency lighting system activated as long-range sensors detected course corrections in the Devourer fleet. They were accelerating, and their estimated arrival time had just shortened to 14 months. Reed checked his personal display and nodded grimly. Time for debate is over. The galaxy needs to make a choice. Do you trust humanity to defend you using weapons and tactics that violate every principle of civilized warfare? Or do you prefer to face extinction while following the rules? Chancellor Vorth's crystalline form had darkened to almost black, a color rarely seen in his species. What exactly are you asking of the Council, Ambassador? Reed's smile held no warmth as he prepared to reveal the true scope of humanity's preparations. I'm asking you to let us do what we do best, Chancellor. Because when the Devourer fleet arrives, they're going to discover that humans don't believe in half measures. The emergency assembly session continued as Reed began outlining humanity's unconventional battle plans, but every being present understood that they had just crossed a line from which there would be no return. The sight greeting Admiral Elizabeth Blake as she stepped onto the command deck of the UHNS Prometheus would have been impossible to imagine just weeks earlier. Through the massive viewport, alien warships hung in formation around Earth's moon, their crews working alongside human technicians to integrate technologies that had never been designed to function together. For the first time in galactic history, the combined fleets of 47 different civilizations were operating under unified command. The logistics alone should have been impossible, but desperation had a way of making the impossible merely difficult. Reed stood at the central holographic display in the Fleet Command Center, now bearing the title of Strategic Coordinator for the Allied Defense Force. Around him, alien representatives who had been debating treaty violations just weeks ago now worked frantically to prepare for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Integration Status Report, Reed called out as Admiral Blake approached the tactical station. Blake's neural interface flickered with data streams as she accessed real-time fleet information. Coordinator, we've successfully linked quantum communication networks with 81% of Allied vessels. The Cathari energy shielding technology has been adapted to our hull configurations, increasing defensive capability by 340%. More importantly, she continued, the Nexari biotechnology specialists have managed to merge their adaptive targeting systems with our antimatter delivery platforms. The results are impressive. General Kex clicked approvingly from his position at the alien liaison station. Human weapons lack sophistication, but their destructive potential exceeds all theoretical models. Combined with Nexari biological targeting networks, they should prove quite effective. Reed nodded. That's the entire point, General. Sophistication requires complexity, and complexity creates failure points. Against an enemy that fights as a single organism, we need weapons that are simple, reliable, and overwhelmingly destructive. Commander Lyrix, the Solari representative, shimmered with concern. Coordinator Reed, our energy-based defensive systems remain incompatible with human technology. Your ships operate on principles that destabilize our quantum matrices. Commander, that's actually part of the strategy, Reed explained, manipulating the holographic display to show fleet formations. Your vessels will serve as our command and control backbone. Your natural energy manipulation abilities allow you to coordinate fleet movements faster than any technological solution. Think of yourselves as the nervous system of our combined force, Admiral Blake added. Your consciousness-based communication networks will let us coordinate tactics across the entire fleet simultaneously. Admiral Torix, studying the tactical displays from his command station, expressed the skepticism that several alien commanders were feeling. These formations you propose abandon all established military doctrine. How can we coordinate effective defense when our ships are scattered across multiple star systems? Reed smiled grimly. Admiral, conventional defense assumes your enemy thinks like you do. The Devourer fleet doesn't think in any way we understand. It processes information, identifies patterns, and adapts to counter whatever strategies it encounters. He manipulated the display to show simulation after simulation of conventional galactic fleet actions. Every established tactic in your military databases will be analyzed, understood, and countered within hours of first contact. The Devourer fleet has been perfecting this process for millions of years. So what do you propose? Chancellor Vorth asked through quantum transmission from his flagship in high orbit. Controlled chaos, Admiral Blake responded. Every human military innovation in our history came from abandoning established doctrine when it proved insufficient. We're asking you to do the same thing. The display shifted to show historical human conflicts from ancient battlefield tactics to orbital bombardment patterns. The progression was clear. Each major advancement came from someone willing to break the rules everyone else followed. Your technological superiority and refined tactics are actually disadvantages against this enemy, Reed explained bluntly. The Devourer fleet will analyze everything you do, identify the patterns, and develop countermeasures faster than you can adapt. But unpredictability? Admiral Blake continued. Overwhelming force applied without detectable patterns? Multiple contradictory strategies implemented simultaneously? That's much harder to counter. General Kex processed this information through his species' logical framework. You're suggesting that military effectiveness against this enemy requires abandoning logical strategy? We're suggesting that logic is a luxury you can afford when fighting opponents who share your thought processes, Reed replied. The Devourer fleet operates on principles we don't understand, using coordination methods we can't detect, and pursuing goals that make no sense to individual consciousness. So we respond by being equally incomprehensible, Admiral Blake added. Every human action will be purposeful and coordinated, but the overall pattern will be impossible to predict because we'll be implementing 16 different military doctrines simultaneously. The command center fell silent as alien commanders struggled to process this radically different approach to warfare. Everything in their military training emphasized coordination, logical progression, and predictable tactical development. Admiral Torix finally broke the silence. And if this strategy of controlled chaos fails to stop the Devourer fleet? Reed's expression hardened in a way that made every alien present feel ancient survival instincts activate. Then we implement Protocol Omega. The environmental systems in the command center seemed to pause as every non-human representative felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Protocol Omega hadn't been detailed in any briefing document, but the way Reed said it carried implications that made sophisticated alien minds recoil. What exactly is Protocol Omega? Chancellor Vorth asked carefully. Reed studied the tactical displays showing Devourer fleet movements at the galaxy's edge before answering. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to compress the air itself. Protocol Omega is why we built weapons that violate every treaty in galactic law. It's what we implement when we realize conventional victory is impossible. He turned to face the assembled alien commanders directly. It's the protocol that ensures if the galaxy falls, the Devourer fleet doesn't get to enjoy their conquest. The implications hung in the air like radiation from a dying star. No one requested details because everyone understood that some knowledge was too dangerous to share until it became absolutely necessary. 14 months, Reed announced, checking his chronometer. That's how long we have to forge 47 different species into a single military force capable of fighting an enemy that has never been defeated. General Kex clicked nervously. And if we cannot achieve such coordination in time, Admiral Blake answered with the calm certainty of someone who had accepted the unthinkable, then we make sure the Devourer fleet learns what humans mean when we say we don't do half measures. The fleet command center buzzed with activity as alien and human technicians worked to complete the most ambitious military integration in galactic history. Outside the viewports, ships that had never been designed to work together slowly formed into battle formations that defied every principle of established military science. Reed watched the organized chaos of preparation with satisfaction. The Devourer fleet had conquered 17 galaxies using the same methods, facing opponents who always tried to fight according to established rules. But they had never encountered a species that viewed mutually assured destruction as an acceptable alternative to defeat. They had never faced an enemy that would rather destroy everything than surrender anything. In 14 months, the Devourer fleet would discover what made humanity different from every other species in the galaxy. They would learn that some civilizations didn't believe in acceptable losses or strategic retreats. They would learn that humans really didn't do half measures. Reed turned back to the tactical displays, knowing that every decision made in the next 14 months would determine whether the galaxy survived or died. But for the first time since detecting the Devourer fleet, he felt something approaching optimism. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding ways to win wars that everyone else thought were unwinnable. The preparation continued as the combined fleets of 47 civilizations worked frantically to become something the galaxy had never seen before. A military force designed not to win battles, but to ensure that losing them would be equally fatal for both sides. The Kepler 1-86 system had been chosen as humanity's first line of defense for reasons that made perfect tactical sense. It was uninhabited, contained mineral resources that would attract the Devourer fleet, and was far enough from populated worlds to allow for the implementation of extreme defensive measures. Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of the UHNS Prometheus, humanity's most advanced dreadnought, watching as 1,247 ships from 12 different species formed the largest combined military force in galactic history. The fleet hung in the outer system like a metallic constellation, waiting for an enemy that had never encountered effective resistance. "Contact," announced Commander David Park from the primary sensor station. "Devourer Vanguard dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Initial count, 4,200 vessels." Reed, monitoring from the fleet command center deep within Prometheus's armored hull, felt his stomach tighten. Intelligence projections had suggested the Devourer fleet would send a reconnaissance force first, perhaps a few hundred ships to test defenses. Instead, they were facing a formation that outnumbered the entire Allied fleet by more than 3 to 1. "Admiral, additional contacts arriving," Park reported, his voice carrying the strain of disbelief. 6,800 vessels. 7,200, 12,500 and still climbing. Through quantum communication channels, alien voices began reporting in rapid succession. Chancellor Vorth's crystalline tones cut through the chatter from his flagship. "Coordinator Reed, our deep space sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions throughout the system. They're not simply arriving, they're reshaping local space-time to accommodate their fleet. Final count, Reed asked, though he already dreaded the answer. 47 vessels, Park announced. They've stopped materializing, but Coordinator, they're not moving into attack formation. They're spreading throughout the entire system and beginning extraction operations. Reed studied the tactical displays in confusion. Instead of the aggressive assault formations they had prepared to counter, the Devourer fleet was methodically positioning itself around every asteroid, moon, and planetary body in the system. Streams of smaller craft began emerging from the larger vessels, moving toward solid matter with purposeful intent. They're not here to fight us, Reed realized with growing alarm. They're here to consume everything while ignoring us completely. General Kex's compound eyes reflected the tactical displays as he processed the implications. Coordinator, our xenobiology teams are detecting massive energy conversion processes. Whatever they're doing to those asteroids is transforming matter to energy at efficiency levels that exceed theoretical maximums. Time to complete system consumption? Reed asked. Commander Park checked his calculations twice before responding. At current rate, 16 hours for all solid matter in the system. The Fleet Command Center fell silent as the full scope of the situation became clear. The Devourer fleet wasn't treating the Allied forces as a threat worthy of immediate attention. They were background noise to be dealt with after the important business of consumption was completed. It was a level of dismissive confidence that was both insulting and terrifying. All ships, this is Admiral Blake, the fleet commander announced over all communication channels. We're implementing strategy chaos immediately. All vessels move to designated positions and prepare for simultaneous multi-vector assault. What followed would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as either the most brilliant or most insane tactical decision in recorded history. Instead of attacking the Devourer fleet directly, Blake ordered every Allied ship to target the same asteroid simultaneously. 147 ships opened fire at precisely the same moment. Energy beams, antimatter torpedoes, gravitational disruptors, and weapons that existed outside conventional physics all struck a single 3-kilometer nickel-iron asteroid. The resulting explosion created a brief new star that was visible from neighboring systems. The Devourer fleet's reaction was immediate and profound. For the first time since their arrival, every organic vessel stopped its consumption activities. Thousands of ships turned toward the Allied formation with movements that suggested sudden, intense interest. Then something unprecedented happened. A voice filled every communication channel in the system. Not transmitted through normal means, but somehow projected directly into the consciousness of every sentient being present. Unknown vessels, the voice was harmony and discord simultaneously. Beautiful and terrible, you have demonstrated capability parameters beyond initial projections. State your designation and tactical objectives. Reed stepped forward to the main communications array, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether the galaxy survived or died. This is Strategic Coordinator Marcus Reed, representing the Allied Defense Force and the sovereign species of this galaxy. We are here to defend our territory. Defense implies ownership. Ownership implies capability to maintain possession. Demonstrate this capability. What followed was less a battle than a carefully choreographed test of strength. The Devourer fleet launched 600 vessels toward the Allied formation, not as an attack but as an evaluation. The organic ships moved with perfect coordination, their tactics flowing like water around every conventional strategy the galactic forces attempted. But humanity had spent 14 months preparing for exactly this moment. As the Devourer test force closed to engagement range, Admiral Blake implemented the most unconventional strategy in military history. She ordered her ships to engage using 14 different tactical doctrines simultaneously. Cavalry vessels employed precision energy strikes while Nexari bioships deployed adaptive weapon swarms. Valdorian heavy cruisers conducted frontal assaults while human destroyers attacked from 8 different vectors, using weapons that violated several laws of physics. Solari energy beings coordinated the chaos through quantum entangled consciousness, while Terran artificial intelligences calculated firing solutions for weapons that shouldn't have been possible to build. The result was a maelstrom of destruction that followed no pattern, employed no consistent strategy, and achieved results that defied logical analysis. The Devourer test force, designed to adapt to enemy tactics through pattern recognition, found itself trying to counter 20 different military doctrines that actively contradicted each other. For the first time in their expansion across multiple galaxies, Devourer vessels began taking significant damage. Fascinating, the alien consciousness projected across the system, now carrying undertones of what might have been surprise. Your forces employ controlled randomness as tactical doctrine. This approach was not anticipated in our strategic projections. Reed felt a chill as he realized the true implications. The Devourer fleet wasn't just testing their military capabilities. It was learning from them, analyzing every tactic and weapon for future encounters. Admiral Blake, Reed called over the command channel. Disengage immediately. Full retreat to fallback position Delta. Coordinator, we're actually inflicting damage in this engagement. That's exactly why we need to withdraw. Now. As the Allied fleet pulled back from the engagement zone, the Devourer test force didn't pursue. Instead, they returned to the main fleet and began a process that filled every Allied sensor with readings that challenged understanding of biological science. The organic vessels were literally rewriting their own genetic structure, adapting their defensive systems and weapon configurations based on the tactical data they had just gathered. In real time, they were evolving countermeasures to every strategy the Allied forces had employed. They're learning, Reed announced to the fleet, and they're learning faster than any biological system should be capable of. Our calculations suggest they'll be immune to every tactic we just used within 4 hours. The retreat to the fallback position around Kepler 186's outer gas giant gave the Allied commanders time to process what they had witnessed. They had won the first engagement, but in doing so, they had potentially compromised every future battle. Coordinator, Chancellor Vorth's voice carried across quantum channels with barely concealed concern. What is our next tactical option? Reed studied the long-range sensors showing the Devourer fleet's continued adaptation process. In the distance, the asteroid fields of Kepler 186 were disappearing at an accelerating rate as the alien fleet perfected their consumption techniques based on the tactical knowledge they had gained. We're going to show them something they can't adapt to, Reed announced grimly. We're going to demonstrate what happens when humans stop pretending to follow any rules at all. The Allied fleet waited in tense formation as Reed began outlining humanity's final strategy. But every commander present understood that they had just witnessed the enemy's ability to learn and adapt in real time. The next engagement would determine whether controlled chaos was enough to defeat perfect adaptation, or whether humanity would need to implement protocols that no civilized species should ever consider necessary. The final confrontation began not with the massive fleet engagement that military historians had expected, but with a single human corvette broadcasting on all frequencies as it approached the heart of the Devourer formation. Captain Lisa Yang stood alone on the bridge of the corvette Defiant, checking her mission parameters one final time. Through the viewport, she could see the organic ships of the Devourer fleet spreading across the Kepler 186 system like a living infection, consuming everything solid they encountered. Reed, you certain about this approach? Yang asked through the quantum comlink to the main Allied fleet, now positioned at the system's extreme edge. Because once I begin this demonstration, there won't be any possibility of retreat. Reed's voice crackled through the communication system from his command post aboard the Prometheus. Captain, the Devourer fleet has adapted to every conventional tactic we've employed. They've learned to counter our energy weapons, predict our movement patterns, and neutralize our most advanced defensive systems. But there's one variable they haven't encountered, which is the complete willingness to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. Yang studied her instrument readings one final time. The Defiant carried no weapons, no defensive shields, and no escape pods. Instead, her cargo bay contained a single device that human scientists had been secretly developing for the past 4 years. A quantum cascade initiator capable of destabilizing the fundamental forces that held atomic nuclei together. Devourer fleet. Yang broadcast on all available frequencies. This is Captain Lisa Yang of the Terran Defense Force. I'm here to deliver a message from humanity regarding your presence in our galaxy. The response came immediately, projected directly into her consciousness with overwhelming presence that made her neural pathways burn with alien thought patterns. Human vessel, you approach with clear hostile intent yet carry no detectable weapon systems. Explain this tactical contradiction. No contradiction at all, Yang replied calmly, guiding her ship deeper into the Devourer formation. We're not here to engage you in conventional warfare. We're here to teach you something fundamental about human nature. As the Defiant continued its approach toward the center of the massive alien fleet, Reed activated the Allied Forces fleet-wide communication network. Every ship in the combined armada received the same transmission simultaneously. All vessels, this is Coordinator Reed. What you are about to witness represents humanity's final answer to existential threats. We want every species in this fleet to understand exactly what we're prepared to do to protect our galaxy. The Devourer fleet, now numbering over 18,000 vessels after consuming most of Kepler 186's solid matter, began surrounding the small human corvette with predatory movements. Their organic ships flowed through space like living tissue, clearly intending to capture and analyze this anomalous vessel. Human consciousness, the alien collective projected with growing intensity. Your vessel contains technology that does not register on our sensory apparatus. Explain its function and purpose. Yang's response was broadcast across all frequencies, so that every being in the system could hear her words clearly. This device is designated a quantum cascade initiator. It's designed to break the strong nuclear force that holds atomic nuclei together. The effective range depends entirely on how much matter is present to fuel the cascade reaction. The implications struck the alien consciousness immediately, and for the first time since their arrival, the Devourer fleet's movements showed something that might have been uncertainty. You carry a weapon capable of destroying this entire star system. Not a weapon, Yang corrected firmly. A guarantee. You see, humanity spent our entire evolutionary history learning one crucial survival principle. When someone threatens our existence completely, we don't try to wound them or drive them away temporarily. We make absolutely certain they can never threaten anyone again. Reed's voice cut across all communication channels with authority that made every Allied commander focus completely on his words. Devourer fleet, this is our final diplomatic offer. You have exactly 1 standard hour to withdraw every vessel from this galaxy completely. Every ship, every probe, every trace of your presence. Leave now and never return. The alien response carried undertones of genuine confusion that transcended species barriers. You threaten mutual annihilation to protect resources you cannot possibly maintain against our superior numbers and technology. This behavior contradicts all rational survival instincts. Rationality is overrated, Yang replied matter-of-factly. Humans figured that out approximately 50,000 years ago. We discovered that we'd rather die fighting than live under someone else's rules. And if we're going to die anyway. She paused, letting the weight of her words penetrate every consciousness in the system. Well, we're definitely taking you with us. The Devourer fleet began shifting into defensive formations, their organic vessels creating living walls around the human corvette. But their movements carried a hesitation that hadn't been present before, the uncertainty of a predator that had suddenly realized its prey was willing to deliver a fatal bite. You would annihilate an entire star system to prevent our expansion into your galactic territory? Reed's response came from the main Allied fleet with the calm certainty of someone stating an obvious fact. We would annihilate every star system between here and the galactic core if that's what it required, because that's exactly who we are. Humans don't believe in half measures. Yang's mission chronometer showed 56 minutes remaining when long-range sensors began detecting unprecedented movement in the Devourer formation. Ships at the fleet's edges were beginning to withdraw from the system, moving toward hyperspace jump points with movements that suggested something between respect and profound unease. Human vessel, the alien consciousness projected, now carrying undertones that might have been grudging admiration. Your species demonstrates commitment to mutual destruction that exceeds all parameters in our experience. This variable was not calculated in our expansion projections. Then let me simplify the equation for you, Yang announced, watching her tactical displays as more Devourer ships began withdrawing. Every human world you approach, every human colony you threaten, every human vessel you attack, will respond with weapons specifically designed to kill everything in the immediate area, including ourselves if necessary. We'll turn every engagement into a suicide mission that costs you more than you could possibly gain, Reed added from the Allied fleet. Because we've learned that some things are worth dying for, and preventing galactic extinction is definitely one of them. The chronometer showed 34 minutes remaining when the Devourer fleet began a coordinated withdrawal from the system. Not a tactical retreat, but a complete evacuation. Thousands of organic vessels moved toward the system's edge with movements that suggested the alien equivalent of nervous haste. This galaxy demonstrates defensive capabilities that exceed acceptable loss. Parameters, the alien. Consciousness broadcast across all frequencies. Your species has achieved something unprecedented in our expansion history. You have convinced a force of nature to seek easier prey elsewhere. Yang watched from the Defiance Bridge as the last Devourer vessel disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a star system stripped of everything except its primary star, and the gas giant where the Allied fleet waited. The quantum cascade initiator in her cargo bay powered down, its doomsday countdown stopping at 19 minutes. All ships, this is Captain Yang. Mission accomplished. Returning to formation. As the small human corvette turned away from the now empty center of the system, the Allied fleet began the long journey home. But the real victory wasn't the withdrawal of the Devourer fleet. It was the message that would spread throughout the galaxy and beyond. Humanity had faced a force that had successfully conquered 18 different galaxies, and their response hadn't been to build better defenses or negotiate more favorable terms. They had simply made it clear that threatening humanity meant choosing mutual annihilation over conquest. 6 months later, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Devourer fleet had been detected in 23 different star systems, but in every case, they had withdrawn immediately upon discovering any trace of human presence or human allies. Reed stood before the Galactic Council one final time. But now there were no accusations of treaty violations. Instead, there were requests for protection agreements and mutual defense pacts. Coordinator Reed, Chancellor Vorth's crystalline form had returned to its normal blue transparency. The Council wishes to formally ratify the Terra Doctrine, recognizing humanity's unique defensive philosophy and granting special authorization for weapons deemed necessary for mutual destruction deterrence. Reed nodded respectfully. We appreciate the Council's understanding, Chancellor. However, I should mention that Earth's military development program has not slowed down. If anything, we've accelerated our weapons research significantly. Why? Asked Admiral Torix. The Devourer threat has been neutralized through deterrence. Reed's expression carried the weight of someone who understood that the universe contained threats